smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditties. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and today I have Andrea Grant in the house, and we're going to be talking about her new book called Modern Natives, and we're going to be talking about all of that good stuff, and we're going to be talking about her tea. And the tea that she's serving tonight is preserving Natives' cultural stories in a new media format so that they are more accessible to various generations. That is the tea that we are serving tonight in the house. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. We get over to all those platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, subscribe, and then jump over to the podcast apps, Spotify, Podbean, Listen Notes, and also check out babyboomers.org because Miss Liz is partnered with them, and you can follow also some other incredible podcast over there on that platform. So tonight we will be speaking with Andrea and all that good stuff. But before we get over there, we're going to do a disclaimer and a beautiful intro, and then we're going to spill some tea together. And I want to thank everybody for joining me this afternoon for an incredible tea time. Again, get these tea times out there because they do make a difference for the guest and for somebody that they resonate with who's listening. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I, Miss Liz, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com, or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart. And if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where stories are not just shared, they are felt, lived, and carried across generations. Today's guest brings us a voice that bridges past and present traditions and modern expressions, reminding us that storytelling is more than words, it is truth. Please join me in welcoming Andrea Grant, a Canadian-born writer and multimedia artist of mixed blood Coast Salish ancestry, whose work weaves together Indigenous mythology and contemporary art. Andrea's work moves across storytelling, poetry, photographing, film, and performance, creating immersive experiences that bring ancestry voices into modern spaces. Her latest book, Modern Natives, an illustrated collection of reimagined Coast Salish myths, reimagines ancient stories in today's world, asking us to consider what happens when the spirit of the past walks among us in the present. from the Coast of Salish people. I'm going to get her to say, because I don't want to mispronounce it. People's stories are not just told, they are truth, identity, and connection. And through Andrea's work, those truths continue to live, evolve, and reach new audience. So grab your cup and lean in. Today's tea time is about culture, storytelling, and the power of honoring where we come from while creating where we are going. And let me get Andrea in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. Andrea, can you pronounce it? Because I don't want to show any disrespect.
Yes. No, of course it's Salish.
Salish.
Salish. It's, it's obviously a different language, so it is hard to sometimes translate it from English and to know how to pronounce the A, but it's Salish.
Yeah, and I don't want to show any disrespect to your native language in that as well. Andrea, I want to get to know you a little bit before we get into your book and all the good stuff that you're doing in today's world. Could you share a little bit about who you were as a little girl and who you are now as a grown woman?
As a child, I always felt the calling to be a storyteller, and I was always writing little books and drawing and trying to make like a library of my own content. And then as I got into my teenage years and college, I studied creative writing, and I felt that helped me develop my voice as an editor, because of course we need to evolve constantly. And then I just started creating my own reality. I wanted to have a magazine, so I just started a magazine called Copious out of the blue, and it was a mixture of poetry, interviews, pop culture, and it did really well. It was that zine time where these little books were very popular, and then I moved to New York City and worked in publishing for a magazine, which was a great experience, and just always followed that path. And then I got this idea for a comic book called Minx, and I started to create early renditions of this Indigenous superhero, and kind of went from there. And
Andrea, do you want to share a little bit about Minx? Because I looked at Minx. Anybody wants to know more about Minx, they can check out her website that is on the screen. But Andrea, tell us a little bit about that superhero that you created.
Basically, I thought, in a way, it was a parallel to my own story. It's about a girl who is mixed blood. She's half Native. She moves to New York City from the Pacific Northwest and gets called to this great adventure. And Natives believe that when you sleep and dream, you go into a dimension called Dreamtime, which is considered as real and valid as this reality. So she was called to be a dream warrior and fight forces that attack people in their nightmares, and a whole other insidious world different from the waking world. And then in the waking world, she wanted to be an artist and was just trying to live her life. And then a bunch of supernatural wolves show up and call her to this adventure, and she realizes that there's a larger destiny for her. So there's a lot you can do when you're working with parallel universes and different characters with their own personalities, and it's been a really fun project.
So Andrea, I found on your site, there's a statement, and it says, they say, if you die in your dreams, you die in real life. What's that for?
That's kind of part of the storyline, and that's an urban myth that I'd heard, that you have these dreams where you're going to jump off a cliff or something, but you don't. You fly or you do something else, and you're not really like jumping down into the abyss and nothing bad happens to you. So yeah, it was this urban legend that I'd heard. If you actually die in your dreams, you're going to die in real life. It's a sign. And I wanted to take that and play around with it, and by making this character like a dream warrior who's protecting people from their nightmares and bad things that can happen in the dream world. It just seemed like a grand statement to open the description of what the book was about, or the books, I should say.
Well, we have a comment here, so I'm going to guess that this person knows you. They said Andrea is also an Anglo-American.
Anglo-American? Yeah, I mean, my mother is white. My father is native, so I'm half. I'm mixed. That's true.
I'm gonna guess that they know you, this person who's tuning in.
Maybe.
We have another comment here that is, this conversation is so powerful. How did Andrea first start re-imaging these ancestry stories?
Okay. I always had an interest in Native mythology, and I've always studied it, read whatever books I could. And a few years ago, I connected with my tribe. My father was very spiritual and gifted in arts and carving and healing, and a shaman. And when I got to meet my people, so I was living in New York, and I trekked back to the Pacific Northwest, and it was beautiful and it was ceremonial, and I was gifted by the knowledge keepers of the tribe like a stack of binders like that with archival material, like things that had just been typewritten and had never been put into book format. And they said, we like your comic book, we like your stories, we grant you permission to use this material. And so I felt, they told me, this is your job, kind of, this is, we see that you're called to this. It's your responsibility to be a storyteller and take some of our lesser known myths and translate them, and take what was originally oral stories and tradition that had been typed out or put into print but had not been widely distributed. So I've always been really interested in bringing a multimedia aspect in, bringing video in, audio in, short film, like just to tell our stories in different ways so that they reach a wider audience.
What are some of the myths of the Salish tribe?
Okay, a lot to do with Salish myths. It's a lot of animal spirit, so a lot of transformation myths. So the people went and this happened and they turned into killer whales and swam away to freedom. There's two types of myth in the Salish storytelling world, and one is that it's ancient myth, so it's sort of like coyote, raven, spirit animals, like the tricksters, all the characters before humans were really part of the story. And then you get a point where humans are involved in interacting with these deities, if you will. And an interesting thing, so the narratives are not considered to be fiction. They're considered to be fact, and they're considered to be teachings from the ancestors. And so a storyteller, you can include historical accounts of things. You're allowed to make the story your own, but in a way you don't own the story. You're telling your version of it to teach and carry on that knowledge.
Andrea, do you feel like the elders have given you the wisdom and and the light to share the stories for the modern natives and the younger generation?
Definitely. Like we've definitely, I'm always in contact with, I've got my advisors who I'll run something by them. Like, do you think that this story is appropriate? If we bring in like the coyote, but he's hanging out here and he's doing this. And just, I find that everything has been met with approval and keep going. I feel really blessed because a lot of people beyond my tribe, a lot of natives just are appreciating the stories and having fun with them. And wow, this is looking at this myth that we didn't know about, but in a modern context, looking at it in a new way. So definitely, but I love that feedback. I just really value that. I think it's important because I would never write anything that they thought was like maybe a secret, like from the materials that they gave me, there's a lot of stuff that's about Coast Salish magic and how to do a rain making ritual and how to do this and things that just are really cool, but it's understood that some things are just kept private.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Like the cultures and traditions stay within their tribes, right? Because if everybody opens it up, then all the tribes get into mixing different cultures and traditions and that, and then that's where the misinformation comes from, right? And that's where the separation of the tribes start to divide.
Yeah. It's sort of like, how there's universal myths in all cultures. So there's a flood myth
Yeah.
in every culture and creation myths and the Coast Salish people approve of you reinventing them and making your own interpretation of the myth. But
Yeah.
like you said, there's always a thread that binds them together. They never
Right.
stray too much from the lesson in the story. I'd say the lessons are consistent
Absolutely.
usually.
Well, we have a couple of questions that are coming in, and I'd like to get them out to you. And the first one that I'd like to get out to you is you say stories are truth. What does this mean within the Coast
Salish.
Salish culture? So what does,
Basically, how we interpret stories, it's not fiction. It's not, everything's based on our experiences or a myth somehow. If we're writing stories about natives and but yeah, the people consider it to be true. Like it's not, you're not making it up. You're
yeah,
drawing from the well and you're just maybe reinterpreting it a little bit. But we believe there's different dimensions. We believe like in the transformation and the animal spirits, and what we believe most dominantly is that the ancestors sometimes speak through us. So those words are being channeled not just by yourself and your imagination, but maybe your grandmother is coming in and voicing a point of view or whatnot. So they're considered factual rather than fiction.
so your tribe, do they get the storytelling through the animal spirit, the fire, the nature, or is it
Nature speaks to you, and there's a life there, but ancestors, like the elders that have passed away, basically have passed on. They're very present in our culture and very revered and considered. So sometimes it's about kind of like if you turn a radio on, and you get a different radio frequency and you get somebody, maybe it's a relative or somebody from the past that you don't even know, but guiding you to, like, helping with these stories a little bit.
So it's kind of like the ancestry coming through the spirit of you're having a cup of tea. Like we mentioned before we went live, you have your grandma's cup of tea. Does that cup speak to you in a way when you hold it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So it's I always loved this china pattern when I was a kid, the blue roses from Royal Albert, and my grandmother bought me a tea set at one point, and it was just a couple of cups and saucers and the beautiful teapot and the cream and sugar. Um, but it remains one of my treasured possessions. It's managed to survive moving across the country a couple of times and not breaking. So it's just, and it makes me think of her when I look at it.
And that's what I mean, like the things we hold, right, that are dear to us, like a teacup, the memories, the moments, bringing that past to the present. And you talk about this a lot with all of the different medias that you use with photographing and uh, poetry and film. You bring that through in your work, right, Andrea?
Yeah, I feel I do. I feel I'm drawn to this space of when we're being really honest and not, we're thinking beyond ourselves, or I'm thinking there's a larger message. Like, what do I want to convey? What A poem is one thing, but to do a spoken word film, that's a huge project. And I make sure, okay, am I telling some of our stories the way that they would want to be interpreted? Am I describing ritual or remembrance? And there's always something with one poem starts out, the bones of my ancestors burned beneath my ankles. And I just think about that quite a bit. Just think about honoring the past, but looking to the future.
Well, and that's the thing. My Oma, which means grandma, was teaching me the past, right? To be in the present to get ready for the future. And I think that's what all the ancestors really want us to do, right? Is to understand the past stories so we can bring them into the present so that they can be in the future when we're no longer here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's carrying on tradition and not forgetting the things that are important.
And in native tribe traditions and cultures are slowly disappearing, and it's people like yourself, Andrea, that's keeping them alive, right? By sharing them through poetry, films, and the work that you do, and the future generation of your tribe will honor you for that because you kept it alive, you kept it moving, you kept the stories there, right? For the elders because they're no longer here to tell those stories. So they're coming through to you and saying, share our stories, get our tradition and culture out there. We have some couple questions here that I'd just like to get out to you, Andrea, about the culture. What challenges in re-imaging ancestry stories today?
I would say just wanting to bring a fresh perspective. So, one thing I love to do with my stories is I'd like to take a myth and maybe it's a myth set within a new reimagined myth. So, an example would be a father telling his daughter about the Sky Sisters and the myth of that, and the daughter really thinking about maybe how that relates to her own life or what she wants to do. There's just a lot of lessons I'd say as far as a challenge, for me, it was really important to have every character and every story. Usually they're in the first person, a couple of them are in the third person, but it's making sure that everyone has their own voice and they don't all sound the same. So one sister will have one voice and one sister will be maybe a little bit more funny or lighthearted, and there's always a juxtaposition. I don't want it ever to be flat.
So we have a question here for you, Andrea, about the younger generation. It says, "Good evening, everyone. How do younger generations connect with these reimage myths stories?"
I think they're looking at it like it's interesting because the book is a paperback and it's a large book. It's 8 by 10 and it's printed and you would want it on your bookshelf. Like it's a pretty book. But of course, there's the Kindle now and the digital versions of everything. And so how younger generations are clicking through and scrolling through and not like speed reading, probably.
Yeah. Or having the book read to them.
Exactly. Exactly. But I'm noticing that with the digital age, there's a nostalgia. People want to read or they want to look at a book and pick it up and touch it and feel the paper. So I don't get to find out where the book goes always. Sometimes I'll get a lovely email that says, "Oh, I loved your book and I passed it on to my sister." And they say that with every book, 4 or 5 people end up looking at it and kind of reading it, which is an interesting statistic. I don't know if that's accurate right now. But a few years ago, that was the stat for publishing. So you have to hope that it's just going to be seen. And because it's got pictures, illustrations in it, it's easier. Someone's going to pick it up and like it more, a younger person who loves visuals and is used to viewing media that way. And then, my goal is to learn some of the animation and learn how to kind of bring some of these bits to life in a different way.
Well, I really encourage all my listeners to go over and check out this website that you see on the screen, AndreaGrant.com, because you'll understand Minx and you'll understand a little bit more of what she's speaking about tonight. Check out that superhero because there is so much, and poetry is there, books are there. I really want you guys just to pop over. I have everything on the screen for you guys to go and check it out so that you can get to know my guests a little bit more. You also, if you look over on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little bit of what Andrea does and what she's a part of, and all her a little kind of like a little resume bio is in the corner. So I like to give you guys all the information. So if you really just want to keep checking out my guests for more, because I do see the comments coming in that you guys would like to know more about Andrea's work and all that, check out the websites. I'm telling you guys, you'll be amazed on the incredible work that this young lady is doing. She's amazing. And the artwork, we're going to bring up her book that we're going to talk about tonight. But before we do that, we're going to get into the question that just came in for you, Andrea. And that is, how does Andrea Grant decide what traditional elements to modernize in her work?
Just instinct. I'll have, before I write a story, I usually outline it. So create like a very simple paragraph. What is this about? What is the theme? What do I want to convey? And from there, I don't know, it just unfolds. So sometimes it's a myth within a myth. Sometimes it's a character like Coyote and he's on his own journey. Or sometimes it's a completely new story, but it has to do with the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement, and women transforming and saving a girl who's been abducted. And there's always a redemption in my stories. I think the narrative keeps a certain pace within itself, and then there's some kind of resolution or some kind of lesson. So as far as modernizing, I'd say, yeah, I take everything, and I don't want to repeat what's been done.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, if there's a story about coyote, I'm not going to just synthesize it and do that, because people can find that online, and there's other writers who've done that. And what can I do to make it different, and what can I do to make it a deity like that, to have a human aspect, for example.
Well, we got 2 more questions, and then we're going to jump into her book. So stick around for that, because I'm going to bring up the book. You'll be able to see the beautiful cover and all of that good stuff. The next question I have for you is, do you think reimagining myths changes how communities understand their own culture identities?
I think it just adds a layer of perspective. I think that if people enjoy the story, it's going to stick in their minds and entertain them. And I think just, it's like, yes, I have the outline when I'm about to write a story, but it goes through like a ton of revisions on my end. And is this compelling enough? Is this like exciting? Okay, what could I do instead? How can I turn it upside down? How can I bring like maybe a sense of humor into some of the stories, or redemption? Like, you want people to feel satisfied when they've read something
Yeah.
that you've written. You don't want them to be like, oh, I just wasted 20 minutes of my life.
I can't get those 20 minutes back. You know what? You guys tune into Miss Liz for 1 hour every Tuesday and Thursday, sometimes Mondays and Fridays, because Miss Liz is having to add all of that in there. But you know what? It's 1 hour of good entertainment and good information, good education, and you get to know a little bit about different cultures, traditions, languages, all that good stuff. What goes into this question is, how do multimedia formats like film, poetry, and photography enhance the preservation of Indigenous stories?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Right? I got good listeners.
Everyone's asking really great questions, and thank you for that. I appreciate that, because they're well thought out. Okay. I would say, like, for me, it's something like I just wrote for myself as a guide. And basically, poetry gives me like an intimacy and a rhythm. Like,
Mhm.
if I want to explore something, and maybe something short form, illustration brings the myths that I want to highlight to life and makes them relatable. And film introduces movement, breath, and time. So with the film especially, there's always a native theme, and I always work with native actors and people, and those are the longest stories, really, because those are like 6 minutes or 8 minutes. But I feel there are different versions of storytelling, and just poetry, I always felt like it really comes from the heart in a different way. And it's just a moment you get inspired and then just start writing. And a film has to be like storyboarded and really well thought out, vocals recorded. And then a book, you have the chance to revise it. You can do a lot of it yourself, before you get the illustrators involved and whatnot. So they're all different mediums, of course, but I feel like they weave together different parts of the psyche and someone's response to the work. They might like one thing more, or the animation, or just, I feel by covering different terrain that it makes the work more accessible.
You know, and by sharing and expressing yourself through poetry, through film, through pictures, you know, you're bringing different avenues for different audiences and different generations, right? To understand the language and the tribe and the storytelling behind it. And I'm a strong believer that storytelling is what's going to change the world. You know, when we keep keeping those stories alive, we're going to change the world by bringing back the traditions and the cultures and that. I'm going to pull up your book. If you just want to share a little bit about the cover for the audio listeners that might not be able to see it, but if you audio listeners really want to check out Andrea's work, check out her website. I'll get her to say it at the end of the show. But I'm going to bring the book up, and if you just want to share a little bit about the book, Andrea, and then we're going to get you to do a little bit of reading, because she's going to read us a little short story too.
All right. Well, this cover, in this book, there is one story that's based, it's an origin story of Minx, my comic book character, and it's called Run Me with the Wolves. And so I really wanted the idea of there being like a narrator and a main voice. So the heroine of Minx, that archetype, and then the wolf spirits. So it's like the connection between human and animal, and you have the cityscape, but you also have nature in the background and the water. And so it's all about juxtaposition and opposites.
So, Andrea, how did you get the cover? And is that you on the cover?
I play my character Minx. Because, and I make my friends be characters, because the artists always need a reference. So it's just really, I'll give them a description, I'll give them a bunch of photos, whether it's of me or whether it's of friends that pop up in the story in different pages. And it's a good visual guide, and it's kind of fun. When I started doing Minx, people didn't really do cosplay or what they do now at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So I would go and dress up and have a few friends come and dress up, and everyone was like, what is this? But it caught their attention. And there's still a lot of readers from those early days who connect and say hi once in a while. And hey, do you remember when you had that red-haired girl saying this? And it was like live theater, and pretty fun. So yeah, I just always kind of stuck to that model because it's easier, you know, half Indigenous, like not dark, but dark hair. And in a way it parallels my own life, the stories that I write about her. Not that I'm going into the dream world and fighting crime, but just some of the observations, or just some of the things that in the daytime life, you know, that happen to the character. Like she wants to be an artist, and it just ends up being like a really fun outlet, and really an interesting parallel in some ways. I always say that things I write are either true or they come true. And there's been some eerie experiences where I've written something and then it's happened.
Do you want to share an experience?
Yeah. So, for example, in the Minx Dream War book, I wanted the character to be attacked by a monster in the East Village, kind of, who was from the dream world that kind of came through. And then she goes in a coma for a long time. And then she wakes up and like the world's different. And really, people don't, I guess sometimes they stay in comas that long, but it's not really typical. But then, but then I had like a hospital emergency and I was in the ambulance and I was thinking like, God, did I write this on some level, like accidentally? So I'm pretty careful with that stuff now.
So, Andrea, you asked if you could read a story. So, do you want to read your story, a little story to us?
Yeah, I will read. I will read The Water Dream, just because it's a shorter length story. Some of them are quite long. Actually, I'm going to give you two choices.
Oh,
Do you
I
want,
get to choose.
You get to choose. Do you want the water monster myth, or do you want a story kind of a family trying to find their
Oh, let's go.
togetherness? And
And they're both good. Uh, all my audience, would you like the water monster or the family? What would you guys like to listen to tonight? Put it in the comment section, and then we'll see. We'll give you guys a few seconds. I'll ask Andrea a couple of questions in between, and we'll see what you guys say, and then we'll get her to read the little story to us. Andrea, I'm going to ask you some lightning bolt questions, just fast answers for these ones. And then we'll see what the listeners want to hear. If they want to hear the water monster or the family tradition, and we'll take it from there. One word that describes your art.
multimedia.
Oh, past or present, which speaks louder to you?
I would say I'm a futurist. So I think
Oh,
about the past a lot and I think about the present a lot, but I really look to the future for things.
interesting. Story or image, what comes first for you?
Story.
Hmm. What is one truth we need to remember?
But there is more than what we see in our day to day, that the trees have energy. The world is so alive and we are so interconnected, more than we think that we are. So even if you have a neighbor you don't like, you're still like somehow tethered to them, or there's a strange connection. And yeah, just that all living things are connected.
And I'll keep the last question for after you read. And we got a lot for water monster. So let's
Oh,
do
really?
water monster. Yeah.
All right. Okay. This is called The Water Dream. I was 3 years old when I fell into the Englishman River. The gray-green effervescence that belied the pole of the depths and death, approaching rapidly, enveloped me. So blurry were the currents trying to lull me into eternal sleep that I could hardly make out the serpentine shape approaching me. It curved in and out of focus, waking me to the danger I was facing. I was drawn to the way it danced in the shadows, all shimmering gold and purple scales, and yet I was tethered to the rest of my future life, flashing above me. As I started to kick to the surface, a light struck my eyes and I lost my bearings. I recoiled and reached up again, narrowly avoiding razor-sharp teeth biting my struggling toes. Strong hands finally met mine, lifting me from my river grave and away from the colossal creature. Then I saw its cold, terrifying eyes staring back at me. I screamed and everything went black. I lived, but my consciousness was forever altered. As children, my sister and I took swimming lessons at Four Poles Beach, a place where several cold rivers and inlets meet the Pacific Ocean on Vancouver Island. Whenever the swimming teacher tried to get me to hold my breath and swim underwater, I panicked. When I tried to submerge my head, I would hear a rush of noise, like a car speeding down the freeway. My ears would start to ache, and then there would be an eerie silence. It was a lonely feeling, and I feared it like death. I began to avoid immersing my face in water, and once I learned how to swim on my back, I kept my ears slightly raised above the surface. I was drawn to the water, but simultaneously avoided it, even when I was older. I would join friends at some of the more popular cliffs in the area, like Little Qualicum Falls, Englishman River Falls, or Triple Falls. They would meet there to jump from the highest points over waterfalls and into the rivers below. I would close my eyes as they dove, their limbs as controlled as dancers, because I didn't want to see it if they died. Though still well out of danger, I often joined my friends near the edge of the falls and thought, what if I slipped? It could happen in a millisecond, as it had happened to other kids who ignored the warning signs to not walk past a certain point on the trails where the rocks were slippery. I would picture myself falling ungracefully, spitting down into the freezing water, then repeating the scenario as if I were breathing it in and drowning all over again. As I got older, my relationship with water grew even more intense and otherworldly. I began to sense its currents beyond the many rivers, lakes, and oceans that are part of the ecosystem of the island. By the scent in the air, I knew precisely when it would rain and whether it would fall in a light mist or torrential downpour. Likewise, I could predict when we would have a dry summer with dangerous forest fires. If I concentrated, I could even influence the patterns of water. I could encourage a slightly overcast sky to deepen with thick clouds and suddenly burst open with rain, or adjust the rain pattern from delicate to heavy to streaming sideways. As I practiced these powers, I discovered that making a particular hand motion would burn off the marine haze around the sun, so its brightness would dominate the sky, even when the forecast predicted otherwise. On Vancouver Island, Qualicum Beach is the main attraction. It's one of the best towns anywhere, and the one place I feel content. Nothing exciting happens. The days are on repeat. But this is an illusion because so much happens under the surface. It certainly feels like a place of magic, where lessons are learned through metaphor. Ever since I was a little kid in the playground acting out Disney princess scenes with my friends, I've looked for the story in everything. Every culture has the same mythological ideas, gods and goddesses, only with different names. There isn't much difference between the Greek god Ares and the Cowichan Calypsan stoneheads. The First Nations counterpart to Helen of Troy or Aphrodite is always the chief's beautiful, graceful daughter, who men from opposing tribes boldly fight over to try and win her heart. In the Odyssey, Odysseus struggles with storms, comes across incredibly seductive nymphs, and finds himself constantly trapped between impossible choices. The ocean is an elemental opponent, as perilous as any other villain. It was certainly my nemesis at times. I tried to make sense of why I was different from the other kids at school, who didn't seem to take things too seriously. I attributed some of my anxieties to worrying about the future. I was creative and could never see myself becoming a doctor or a lawyer, for example. Most people in my town probably thought my life was great on the surface. I lived in a 4-bedroom house with a pool and a guest house in a covetable subdivision near the ocean. My family had a good deal of money, so I had some financial stability if I decided to become a writer, which I was leaning towards. I was popular at school and got good grades, but I still felt hollow, like a tree no one realizes is dead until a windstorm blows it down. Whenever I was morose and tried to talk to my mother about my feelings over afternoon tea, she would say that I read too many heavy books and that they made me too analytical. It was probably true. Nothing was ever a simple equation in my head. To figure out what was going on with me, I investigated shamanism and some of the Coast Salish traditions that my grandfather, the only son in a family of daughters, had passed down to me. To be initiated into shamanism, a person must suffer to receive the mysterious and powerful gifts from the Great Spirit. At the bottom of the abyss, when you're shivering and vulnerable and facing whatever terrifies you the most, comes a transformation that's like a rebirth. Had something similar happened to me when I almost drowned all those years ago? Had the sea creature that slithered towards me and haunted me all these years been an aspect of the Great Spirit? Had I in fact died and been reborn? During my search for answers, I learned of Yucatina. An Indigenous speaker had visited us at school and taught us about First Nations legends. He described Yucatina as a water monster with a body as thick as a tree trunk, coated with glittering, icy purple scales. Yucatina's head had massive horns, and an enormous, blazing white diamond called the Ilan rested atop its crest. If any person were to capture that diamond, they would have everything they desired, including success in hunting, finding love, or rainmaking. The diamond's most extraordinary gift would be prophecy. The owner would be able to see the future. The East Coast Cherokee warrior Akusititi was the only one said to have possessed the jewel. Most drowned trying to win it. I wondered if the creature I saw was Yucatina, or maybe it was only a legend. Besides, if the serpent was only supposed to live in rivers, why had I sensed it in the ocean? On rainy days, I even imagined I caught glimpses of its shadow lurking in shallow pools. Some think Vancouver Island occupies a unique geographic location, where powerful magnetic currents pass underneath and meet, making the land an easy access point into the other world. Had Yucatina reached me from the other world? After learning about the sea serpent, I couldn't shake the vision of his face with those terrible bicuspids. He began appearing in my dreams. I would feel his sinuous body wrapping around my neck, trying to strangle me like a necktie, and wake up paralyzed, wondering, what if he wins one day? Somehow he and I were intrinsically connected. I was sure Yucatina had an important message for me. One night my recurring dream became more vivid, with hyperreal colors and abstract shapes that flashed like an animated Picasso painting. I was running in a sparkly tunnel. It felt like a massive head rush, but my body weighed almost nothing. Thunder clattered in the distance, and I knew something inside me had caused the storm. Then I heard a deep, seductive voice chanting my name over and over. Noah, come and find me. I walked through a fire burning straight through my path and was unscathed through the heavy smoke. It suddenly began to pour, and I was instantly drenched. The rain was so heavy that it was falling sideways, icy sleet that cut through my skin. My legs were like weights, but in my stumbling, they still led me to daylight towards the voice. But when I finally reached my destination, I was all alone. The dream then sped up, and I realized I was standing on a cliff, my toes hanging over the edge. The sky got dark again, and it began to pour. I moved forward and plummeted into the water, a menacing laugh echoing shrilly in my ears. When I woke up, the scent of salt water was all around me. My room was bitterly cold, and I was shivering with fear. I couldn't fall back to sleep afterward. I felt a sense of vertigo for the rest of the day, like I was falling repeatedly at high velocity. One day I revealed to my father that I was having bad dreams that were filling me with terror. We talked about what it means to face the demons within. He said it was only through a series of sweats at his sweat lodge that he was able to heal the violent rage he had struggled with for most of his life. He invited me to join him for his next session. Amid my first sweat lodge experience, something dark inside me was revealed. The shaman conducting the ceremony told me it was like a shadow spirit was attached to me, trying to steal my vibrancy. He took out a rattle and shook it hard, insisting that the sound would make the shadow leave temporarily, at which point healing magic could be initiated. Snakes covered the ground, and I felt my soul leaving my body, hovering slightly above and witnessing what was occurring. The room started to fill with natives, young and old. Drumming began. As the pounding grew more rhythmic, the sweat became hotter. I realized my ancestors had come to join the ceremony. "Noah, you have summoned us," a great-grandfather said. "You may ask the usual 3 questions." I couldn't speak, but my thoughts could be heard. "Why is it that Yucatina focuses on me?" I asked. "Why do I even see him?" "He's mirroring your actions," my ancestor replied. "If you seek him out, he will seek you out. Break the pattern." I wanted to ask how that would be possible, but instead I asked, "What should I do with my life? I need to know my true purpose." "That's more than 3 questions," the ancestor murmured. "You are a born storyteller. Writing your thoughts and feelings down would help you channel into a narrative you track. That's the only way you will regain control and find peace." I was also told I had power over the elements, but they needed to be harnessed. "Beware of playing games with the weather, or it will play unexpected games with you," another ancestor cautioned. Then they all vanished, leaving me to decipher the riddles and visual clues, such as rain, a notebook to document ideas and discoveries, and a fountain pen, which has long been a classical instrument for writers. My soul was suddenly back in my body, and the room was cooling down. The shaman's ceremonial assistant handed me a glass of ice water, which I drank thirstily. "How do you feel?" my father asked when I got home. "Strange," was all I could say. But in my heart, I knew I'd received a gift to help define my purpose in the physical world. The night after my sweat, I had another dream. I was driving down the California coast on a quest for a treasure that had been lost at sea. I didn't know what the treasure was, only that it contained remarkable jewels and was of great spiritual value. A young man was traveling with me. There was something supernatural about him that suggested he was a conjurer of magic. When I looked into his eyes, they were an otherworldly, silvery olive green. We drove along the raw, sun-baked beaches, searching for the treasure. At each new inlet we'd stop. We'd get out of the car and immerse ourselves in the waves. I was astounded to find that he had the ability to turn into a killer whale at will and swim for hours, transforming back into a human the instant the water became shallow. He was a guardian spirit sent by the ancestors to assist me on my journey. There was no sign of Yucatina. I had no more fear of the water. Around my neck, hanging on a silver chain, was a huge glittering diamond reflecting the sunlight. It was the Ulansuti. I had conquered my ferocious monster. I was the mistress of both worlds, ocean and land.
Well, thank you so much for reading that, Andrea. And thank you to all my listeners who sat and listened to her read that chapter. How many chapters are in your book, Andrea?
Oh, I always forget. There's basically like
Six
six
chapters.
stories. Yeah, some are really long and some are shorter.
Andrea, what is your final message that you'd like to give to my listeners tonight? And where can they find you? Where can they find the book and all that? I'm just going to pop up the book one more time so people can see the incredible cover of this book, because I think it's gorgeous. Just read out and spell out your website for all the audio listeners.
Yes, so my book is Modern Natives. It's available through my website, andreagrant.com. It's also on Amazon. So Modern Natives with an S.
And if you could spell out your website for everybody, and then give me a final message you'd like all the listeners to know tonight.
Okay, sure. My name, Andrea Grant, is spelled AndreaGrant.com. And then the final message, this has been a delightful conversation, and I really enjoyed hearing questions and people's feedback. And again, it just goes back to what I was saying before, that we are all connected, and these stories bind us together, and hopefully people will find inspiration and understand a little bit more about the Coast Salish culture and mythology and storytelling.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners and people that jumped into the studio on all the platforms that we're streaming to: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitch, all of those good platforms. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Just going to give you a quick recap of what tonight's tea time is, and then we'll start a whole new month over with 20 new incredible guests that will share their stories with Miss Liz. If you'd like to know who's coming, check out the press releases. They are on over 400 social media platforms out there, or check Miss Liz's platforms, and you'll see the press release with the list and all of the topics that are coming in May. What a powerful and meaningful conversation. Andrea, thank you for sharing your voice and for bringing forward stories that carry history, identity, and deep cultural significance. Your work reminds us that storytelling is not just about the past, it is about keeping truth alive in the present. Tonight, we were reminded that when we listen to stories rooted in culture and ancestry, we begin to understand that not only others, but ourselves. Your storytelling creates space to reflect, to learn, and to honor the voices that came before us. Here is something to carry with you after this tea time. What stories are you carrying within you, and how are you choosing to honor them? Because stories are not just meant to be remembered, they are meant to be lived, shared, and passed forward. Until our next cup shared, keep listening, keep honoring, and keep telling the stories that matter. And I'll see everybody on the 2nd of May with the new tea times of next month. Thank you guys all for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much.